Stardew Valley 1.6 and the following hotfixes are now out for everyone, and finally, we can look towards the future. Concerned Ape has spoken at length about how complicated it is to finally move on to a new game after pouring 7 years of hard work into a beloved title, and it seems we've hit that time. My channel, and by extension, my life and income, are pretty closely tied to Stardew Valley, so of course Haunted Chocolatier pops up in my head a lot. Is it going to follow the game design philosophies of Stardew Valley? Is it going to have that same longevity? And I thought it'd be fun, now that we're entering the new year, just to talk about it, kind of what we're expecting. So to start, there's quite a bit we already know about Haunted Chocolatier. We'll go over that first before any predictions or anything. It's important to know what we're starting from. So the first most obvious thing, you've been watching it in the background up to this point, we have a trailer. This released when it was announced 3 years ago. It shows us owning a chocolatier that is haunted, imagine that. As a contrast to Stardew Valley, the colors and general vibe are much more muted, warmer, dare I say it, cozy. The game looks like a warm fire on a cold winter day. Aside from scenes where you're in the Chocolatier castle or working the store, there's also scenes of talking to the local villagers and going out to some magical world to scavenge for items. And in this magical world, it's notably much more colorful, kind of more in line with Stardew Valley's color scheme. And then, other than that trailer, we've gotten quite a few images both from Concerned Ape's Twitter and the Haunted Chocolatier blog. I'm pretty much going to talk about all of these images in the later sections, but these images range from the new parts of town that we'll presumably be playing in, to teasing new features. So talking about what I absolutely expect from this game is complicated. It's not like it's a Pokemon game where all of the major decisions are being carefully made by a board of old people aiming to do whatever will make them the most money. This is a guy, sometimes with a small team, just making a game that he thinks will be fun. And instead of a 20-year history of games to look back on and find patterns in, we have Stardew Valley and its updates. So there's very little that we can actually expect other than what we're directly shown or told and can extrapolate from the images that we're given. So let's go through it. First of all, I want to say that I'm enamored with the way that Concerned Ape describes Haunted Chocolatier. If Stardew Valley mostly channeled the energy of the sun, Haunted Chocolatier channels the energy of the moon. Both are vital. Chocolate represents that which is delightful. The haunted castle represents the world of the unknown. Are you not just filled with childlike wonder and whimsy just hearing that? He's describing the game in this nebulous way because these overarching themes of the game are what's most set in stone, while all of the specifics will change and evolve as he continues to work. So from that, I think we can expect this game to be much more magical, not as grounded as Stardew Valley is, where, you're a farmer getting to know the townspeople. I mean, just the concept, you're working with a bunch of ghosts to make chocolate. It's Willy Wonka-esque. Leaning away from the abstract though, the first big thing we know that the game will have is a larger focus on combat. Stardew Valley's combat is incredibly simple. You have an attack and a special depending on what weapon you're holding. There's no combos, the progression boils down to getting a stronger weapon for a bigger number, and that works when it's just one small part of a much wider game. In Haunted Chocolatier though, it's taking up a larger slice of the game pie, and so we already seen that there's a block that stuns enemies and a combo attack you can use to finish them off. CA has said that in this scenario, the sword is your main hand and the shield is your offhand, and in the future we'll see other offhand equipment to aid in different styles of play. In addition, the character always has a bow equipped in this UI element on the bottom left, implying this will be the trifecta of equips. There's also screenshots showing this present next to him, and I don't really know what that means. It's not shown being used anywhere. Maybe it's just the gifting option for NPCs. Then we do have a screenshot of the equip menu, and there's a lot of slots here. We do have the classic double ring setup, but then there's 5 other clothing slots, including socks, oddly enough. So even though the character is clearly wearing pants and a shirt, yet the spots are empty, I think this is one of those cases of it being an early screenshot. I feel like the shirt and pants slot will probably be aesthetic just like Stardew Valley. Although it is possible, since we're taking a larger stance on combat, that it could be some kind of armor system. And then we also have a B-Boss. And how do we know it's a boss? Because of its theme, which is titled bboss.og. And lastly, for the release of the game, we know that similar to Stardew Valley, there won't be any early access release, crowdfund effort, or pre-orders, which is all good and fine. And that's pretty much it. The rest of what we got are vague area images, all accompanied by the caption, Haunted Chocolatier screenshot. lowercase. Anything we can figure out from these would be more of a prediction than an expectation, so I'm gonna start working from larger ideas towards smaller specifics. So for the setting of the game, I think it's always going to be winter. Every screenshot outside of the ones that are made in this magical door world are in winter, and that seems like a very deliberate choice. And Concerned Ape said that he was inspired for the setting of this game from this image here, which is set in winter, very Christmassy, very cozy feeling. And this would aid in the feeling of this being the moon to the Stardew Valley's sun. On that same line of thinking, it seems like this overworld is stuck in a bit of like perpetual dark winter, I think is the way to say it. Like there are scenes where it's clearly brighter than others, yet the sky is still always dark. There are places that are like that through the winter in the real world, so it's not completely out of the question, although I could also see this being caused by something magical. So if this is the case, that begs the question, how is the calendar system going to work? And is there going to be a calendar system at all? We are very clearly up in the mountains, so maybe we're just somewhere where it snows all year? My gut wants to say that there will be a full calendar, but then most games are just, you know, this area is snow, this area is summer always. Having a full season system is more of an outlier than anything. I do think for sure there's going to be a day-by-day system, whether it's part of a larger calendar, I don't know. And then there's one other question that needs to be answered about the setting. Does it take place in the same world as Stardew Valley? I'm kind of working on a whole separate video right now about Stardew Valley's exact setting, but it exists in this in-between of fantasy and real world where monsters exist somewhat rarely, with most people knowing they exist and should be avoided, but knowing very little beyond that. There's hints towards this entire history of dwarves and elves, but it's not common knowledge. And because of how mundane Stardew Valley is in comparison to what we've seen with Haunted Chocolatier, I feel like it's leaning towards a new world that maybe alludes to Stardew Valley just for fun, kind of as a sort of meta thing. Sticking to the world of Stardew Valley strictly would be limiting, especially when this is meant to be a much more whimsical and magical setting, whereas, as I've said before, Stardew is relatively grounded. This seems like a good time to mention that there is like a concept art sheet of all of the chocolate in the game, and there is one that's shaped like a star drop, and another that's kind of shaped like a key fruit. And if these do end up being in the game, I think it'll just be basically little Easter eggs. Concerned Ape has been asked if there's going to be any connection, and he basically always says something along the lines of, I'm not revealing anything yet. Next, looking towards the gameplay, we know it'll be more combat oriented with confirmed shop and town segments. Beyond that, there's a screenshot I want to show you. This one right here. Those are crops. In fact, it's reused kale and potatoes from Stardew Valley. The question is that just set dressing, or are these farmable crops? I'm gonna say it's set dressing. We already know that this isn't our house, we're in the Chocolatier castle, and these rows seem very deliberately decorated with these spots of grass on the ends, the dirt only being in those 3 rows. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that farming and fishing won't be in the game. Farming for a couple of reasons. It was the main focus of the last game, and with Haunted Chocolatier wanting to be more of an adventurous game, I think having crops in the same spot that you have to tend to every day would be antithetical to that. And with fishing, I just don't see where it could really fit in to owning a chocolatier, unless you're putting fish in the chocolate. It just seems like it'd be so separated from everything else. These are also the 2 skills that are the most affected by having a different season, you know, having seasonal crops or fish. And if we're going to be stuck in a perpetual winter, that inherently makes these 2 skills less interesting. So if we're not gonna have those, what's going to replace them? Are they going to be replaced? That leads us to the pie charts. Here's my pie chart of gameplay for Stardew Valley. I made this up mostly from how much time you spend doing each thing and how deep each system is. A lot of farming, not really too much on the mining and combat end of things. Now compare that to what I believe Haunted Chocolatier will be like. So as I said, we're cutting out farming and fishing. We've already seen that foraging in some form exists alongside adventuring. Whether or not it's a whole skill or not, I don't really know. We're still going to be interacting with and getting to know the villagers. Mining fits in very well with this whole adventuring system that I feel like Haunted Chocolatier is going to have, so I'm keeping that in. But then we have two entirely new aspects, cooking and shopkeeping. Cooking does exist in Stardew Valley, but there's really nothing to it, whereas it's in the main gameplay loop of Haunted Chocolatier. These chocolates you make are going to be what you're selling in your shop, they could be used as gifts, and I imagine they can probably be eaten yourself, and since adventuring is going to be a larger part of this game, healing items are probably pretty important. And then we also have this screenshot, which to me looks like one of those research systems where you get a new item, then you research it to unlock a few new recipes or ideas. So I think there's plenty that can be expanded on for cooking, enough to where it can be the farming equivalent perhaps of Stardew Valley. It's something you do at home, you're probably gonna have to do it nearly every day, it's your main income. I see a lot of dots connecting here. And then for keeping the shop. In my mind, the sky's the limit here. It's kind of hard to imagine what could be done because shopkeeper games are so rare. I've played quite a few like Moonlighter, Potionomics, and Recettear. Of them, I think Recettear has the most fully fleshed out shop system, and between the three of them you can get a pretty good idea of how it could work, but I still think they're scraping the surface of what can be done. One of the coolest things about Stardew Valley is the way its individual systems meet up and work together. When you go mining for ore, you can use the bars you get to upgrade your tools, make better sprinklers, and craft new machines. When you give gifts to villagers and get their hearts up, you unlock new crafting recipes. They send you items in the mail that can be useful for other parts of your game. Everything ends up helping out the other systems, and if Haunted Chocolatier does the same thing, inherently, it'll be better than these other shopkeeping games, I think. I'm feeling a little hopeful here, so I think it's time we move on to the next section. So my issue with many shop games is that the shop itself can feel secondary to the dungeoneering or the combat system. The progression will usually be early dungeons give you cheap stuff to sell, you get money until you can buy enough upgrades to move on to the next dungeon, which gives you more valuable items to sell, so on and so forth. This can create a situation where the best thing you can do is brute force yourself into moving on to the next dungeon as early as possible, ignoring the upgrades to your store and shifting focus almost entirely to combat. Haunted Chocolatier, if it retains the whole relationship system from Stardew, could refocus that combat grind into gaining relationship with the villagers, maybe making them willing to pay a bit more or add any number of buffs to the shop. Potionomics actually did this. You earn new bartering tactics depending on who you get to know, and I found that it worked really well. If there's a level up system to the cooking, maybe staying home and, cooking a lot can improve the quality of your products, allowing you to sell them for more money. I really hope that the game isn't going to be get to as late a game of a dungeon as you can and then just sell the most valuable items from them. There's a lot to learn about what previous games did wrong or right, and it's pretty much exactly what Stardew Valley did in regards to the games that came before it. And I hope Haunted Chocolatier can continue that trend. There's one other thing that I hope comes over from Stardew Valley, and it's what I think made me enjoy Stardew Valley the most. It's the freedom. The fact that you can fully beat the game while engaging in or ignoring whatever mechanics you want is what really makes the game special. The way that there's multiple ways to get pretty much every item, the way you can beat the game without farming, without buying any items, without leveling up. That's what really made it special to me. I feel safe in assuming that this is something that's on Concerned Ape's mind, since the latest updates to Stardew Valley have been making leaps and bounds and opening up new possibilities as much as possible, making items available in new ways and being able to pay off perfection in any way that you see fit. When it comes down to it though, that amount of freedom probably won't be able to fit into Haunted Chocolatier to the same extent. But a little bit of that same wiggle room would be great. Those are really my two main hopes. These are systems that would have to be baked into the game from the start. As for any hopes I have for the amount of content or anything more specific, I feel like we have to keep in mind that Stardew Valley has been in development for 10 years, and it was a very different game in 1.0 to even like 1.3, let alone 1.6. It would be unfair to hold any game to the amount of content that Stardew Valley has today, so we might see a similar situation where Haunted Chocolatier releases, and it's a solid groundwork, good gameplay loop, and maybe later on it gets those in-depth endgame systems. Something I forget about a lot, Stardew Valley didn't have an ending when it released. Like, you beat the community center and then you just keep on playing. I do kind of hope that there's going to be an ending to the game, rolling of credits or something. And then there's one last pretty important prediction. When is it going to release? I'm putting my bets, I think, on early 2027. And I know that sounds long, but that's like 2 years. We've been waiting 3 years already. That's not too bad, right? We know Concerned Ape. He works on a thing until he's fully satisfied with it. And however long it takes, I can trust his judgment. That about does it for me. Y'all have any hopes? I know the shopkeeping genre is one that's kinda needed its star game for a while. A lot of shopkeeping games, while good, kinda don't fully fill that fantasy. And it's a hotly debated topic what the next shopkeeping game needs, so I'm sure there will be some opinions. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one, and good night.